what we want to learn is about look at the board and you'll realize what it is. Can we have a general picture of the boards taken? So that is what we want to learn. Kaustubh sir, can you also focus on these objects here? Very interesting. Oh my God. Look here. So, you can imagine what is the expected explanation for this set of things. These toys you used to play long back, and now it's all funny for you. We have already taken into account the morphology, anatomy issues of the plant. So, plant life is probably more mysterious in one sense than animal life. Simply because, you see, we being ourselves animals, and at least for vertebrates, all the various systems are very similar. We understand what it means to be an animal. But then plant life is difficult because none of us ever have experienced what a plant life is. A plant itself can only understand what its kind. We are just failures. So the science of botany is in one sense very different from the science of zoology, because plant world is very different, and although cell level many similarities are there, when you think of the organism, entire organism, the plant as an organism here and the animal as an organism here, well, there are lots and lots of differences. In that case also, very interesting, you are already aware that animals are totally dependent on plants, and you know the reason, and the reason is here on the first board, and you identified this correctly as the process of photosynthesis. It is this process which locks up the energy, the solar energy, and generates the food, and this food is consumed by the animals. Just imagine if there is no photosynthesis. Just imagine if the plants are not able to trap the solar energy. Well, the life on earth will come to an end. It is very commonly known to you right from your PhD classes that the animals are dependent on plants. But then the reverse is also true. The plants are also dependent on animals, and we will be discussing that point as well. One very common thing between the animals and plants is respiration. So the second board is all about respiration. And I think, because we have gone through all your school books, we are aware what it means for you people. You are not thinking of respiration as something like breathing. No, that's only breathing. You know, we take in the air and give out the air, and oxygen mixes with the blood. That is breathing. Respiration is at cell level. What is happening at the level of the cell? The glucose which is being produced here by the plants is being consumed by the animals and also being used by the plants, because why the plants are producing glucose? They are producing it for themselves. So plants produce glucose and also of course starch, and some of that will be converted into cellulose, and it is all being used by the plants themselves. Cellulose is used by plants for constructing their cell walls, and starch which is produced by the plants is a kind of a storage food, and glucose, starch can be converted into glucose, and glucose can be used as a fuel for generating the energy. Energy is very important. You must have ATP energy, and you are all aware of the ATP. I just wait for a few seconds for you to remember yourself. What is the long form of ATP? Yes, some of you have remembered correctly. Adenosine triphosphate, ATP, very popular molecule. A wonderful molecule in the entire living world, whether it is bacteria or protista or plants or animals or fungi, ATP is a must. No ATP, no life. This is a molecule that is a carrier of energy, and so ATP must be produced, and ATP will be produced in this process of respiration. Please understand this. This is something which is common to entire living world. You know already the 5 kingdoms. You already know the Monera, the Protista. Yeah, I can hear some of you wanting to add to others. Yes, you said fungi, right? And Plantae and Animalia, correct. So all these 5 kingdoms, they have the cells, and all of them will require glucose. Wonderful. On one side I say ATP is the molecule of energy, and on the other side I am trying to say that glucose is a molecule of energy. Both things are correct. Because it is in the process of respiration that the glucose energy is converted into ATP energy. I'll repeat some of those things. In the case of the plants, the solar energy is being trapped and ultimately glucose is being produced, and glucose can be converted into starch, glucose can be converted into cellulose, and this glucose energy will be used by the plants. It can also be used by the animals, including humans of course, and this usage of the glucose energy will take place in the cells. When we consume food, whatever food we consume, ultimately you are aware that it is converted into glucose, particularly the carbohydrate material. And the animal cell or the plant cell which is here will use the glucose, and for that purpose you require mitochondria. I think some of your school books clearly and very nicely show these details. The glucose will enter into a cell, an animal cell or a plant cell, and the glucose will first undergo partial breakdown known as glycolysis, and then the product is pyruvic acid, and the pyruvic acid enters into the mitochondria, and there operates another cycle, Krebs cycle, and there are certain other details, but ultimately what you get is ATP. So these two processes, the photosynthesis and the respiration, are complementary. Why complementary? Because you are aware that in the process of respiration, carbon dioxide is being produced, and this carbon dioxide is being used in the process of photosynthesis. And in the photosynthesis, oxygen is being produced. You can see here, and this oxygen is being used here for the process of respiration. Yeah, I think most of you have most of these general ideas, but there are lots of clarifications required. When we go through the different books of the different boards, we find that some boards treat it more lightly and some other boards like ICSE is treating it very heavily. It's okay. When you come to standard 11, you must have a common platform and some kind of common understanding. आमचं असं काही लक्षात नाही आलेलं की कुठल्या बोर्डचे विद्यार्थी जास्त चांगलं काम करतात असं काही नाही. All boards, as far as the students are concerned, and if they are sincere, well, they are benefited always. But I can always say that if you are from state board, try to use, if available nearby, try to use the books of ICSE and CBSE. If you are a CBSE, Central Board student, then definitely you should use state board books because they are so fine, so nice. And ICSE books are of course good but a little heavy. Anyway, but then all have benefits as far as sincerity is concerned. So these two boards, and this is a summary. This will provide you a kind of summary for photosynthesis and respiration and how they are interlinked. I think prefer to first start with the process of photosynthesis with a little bit of pause. I am sure many of you feel nice to understand photosynthesis and respiration, but I'm sure, equally sure, that there must be a good number of students of 8, 9, 10 who probably neglected this topic either, or they somehow found it all very confusing. For all of us now, let's understand this very clearly. Remember, these two topics are going to be there for your 11th and 12th, and yes, they are going to be there as very basic topics all throughout your biology careers. And when you're talking of NEET and all, these are the things which are going to happen to you within a couple of years. फक्त नीटचा विचार करू नका, मी रोज तुम्हाला सांगणार आहे. बायोलॉजी उत्तम पैकी शिकला पाहिजे, मग ते कुठेही कधी आयुष्यभर वापरता येईल इतकं स्ट्रॉंग असलं पाहिजे. लेट्स अंडरस्टँड नाव द फोटोसिंथेसिस. the solar radiation, and the leaves, they will absorb the solar radiation. What is the form of the solar radiation? In fact, what is the form of the light? In what form does the light exist? Yes, it is existing in the form of energy particles. Can you name those energy particles of light? Photons, right? Now, in physics, you might have learned that these photons, whether to consider them as particles or waves, there is a lot of confusion. Let us not worry about it. But then it is definitely a form of energy. So, it is the sun that makes possible photosynthesis, which will take place in all plants, whether they are angiosperms or gymnosperms or bryophytes or pterophytes, or even if they are algae in water, all of those are able to do photosynthesis. It's a very, very primary process. In fact, it is said that oxygen in the environment was not available on Earth till the time photosynthesis started. You are all aware that it is a photosynthesis process which makes possible release of oxygen. And when did it start? When was the oxygen available in the atmosphere? Only after the photosynthesis started. How? We are going to consider that also. So the solar energy is something which is important. You require, addition to that, carbon dioxide and water, because you know the equation very well, that it is CO2 plus H2O that gives rise to glucose. Carbon dioxide and water molecules give rise to glucose, that you know very well. So you require carbon dioxide and water, and we will consider their role specifically, but presently I am talking of the solar radiation. When you think of the solar radiation, and when the leaves are getting the radiation, even this tube light, it has got photons. So even this moment the photosynthesis is going on. पान तोडलं म्हणून काय photosynthesis लगेच काही बंद पडणार नाही आहे. It will be there for a few days, ते dry होईपर्यंत. So whether it is tube light or moonlight or your camera flash or the sunlight, photons are photons and photosynthesis can occur. You can imagine now that when you think of the photons falling here, where are they actually going inside? They are going onto the cells. So this portion which is indicated here means these are cells. Leaves will have cells now. You have already learned the little bit of anatomy of the leaf. I think you have been told about the section of the leaf, and there you know that there is what is called as palisade and spongy parenchyma. काही ना असं काही शब्द सुरू झाले की त्रास होतो. मी म्हणतो जाऊ द्या सगळे शब्द. There are some cells which have chloroplasts, plus leaf मध्ये cells आहेत, and the cells of the leaf have chloroplasts. These are all green things which are chloroplasts. Oh yeah, so the light will reach inside the cells. Yeah, light can reach through the cell walls inside the cells. Now imagine, suppose I magnify one of the chloroplasts. This is the magnification of one chloroplast. How many chloroplasts can be there in a given cell? Depends, but easily 30-40. Surely, out of those 30-40 chloroplasts, one chloroplast has been magnified. But before that, I'll ask you a question: how many cells can be there in a leaf? Well, it's very difficult to answer. Statistically, it can be shown there will be a few lakh or a million cell in a small leaf like this, millions. And one cell will have, suppose, 30 chloroplasts. So 1 million into 30, just calculate. 30 million chloroplasts in one leaf. And if you think of the entire plant, then you can expect enormous number of the chloroplasts. So this green wealth of the earth, it's terrific. It is this green wealth of the earth that makes possible continuation of life on earth, because the chloroplasts contain chlorophyll. I know some of the students feel confused between chloroplast and chlorophyll. There should not be any confusion. Chloroplast is a cell part, cell organelle, you know, mitochondria, chloroplast, lysosomes, ribosomes, cell parts. Plants have these green things, the chloroplast, and you know the chloroplast has a double membrane, and two important regions. There is what is called as granum and a stroma. You are probably aware from your school books that inside the chloroplast there are these tower-like things, and one such thing is called as granum. And there are how many grana? Well, I have drawn only two for convenience, but there can be 30, 40, 50 grana, depends again. And singular is granum. What is the plural? Grana. So there are grana inside a chloroplast, and there is some free material here, and that is being called as stroma. I think these two words you know. You should definitely know granum singular, grana plural, and the grana get connected to each other, and they also connected to the boundary, and the liquid part which is left here and there is all called as stroma. The entire process of photosynthesis occurs here. You are probably aware that inside the granum certain reactions occur, and outside the granum, that is in the stroma, other reactions occur. Chloroplasts are of different designs exist. Usually the chloroplast is oval, usually, but not always. And they are having chloroplasts which are ribbon-like. You know by chance a ribbon-like chloroplast, and do you know the particular organism? Ribbon-like, long, folded chloroplast. Spirogyra. Spirogyra has ribbon-like chloroplast. Some of you might have heard of Chlamydomonas. That's a protist. It's a single cell, and it has got a cup-like chloroplast. So, shapes don't matter. The process which takes place in the chloroplast remains same, and whatever the shape, the chloroplast will always have grana and a stroma. What is a granum made of? Granum is made up of units. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 10, 15, 20. These are called as thylakoids. See, this is also a thylakoid. 1, 2, 3, 4. I have tried to magnify one thylakoid here. These are all thylakoids. Once again, what is a thylakoid? It's a small unit of a granum. These thylakoids are put one top of another to make a tower-like thing. And such grana are distributed into the stroma. What is there inside a granum? That's a very important information. I am trying to magnify here a thylakoid. So, one thylakoid magnified here. Let's again revise. The leaf, a small part of the leaf magnified here to show the cells. Now, one chloroplast of the cell is magnified here. And a chloroplast will have grana and a stroma. And each granum is made up of small units called as thylakoids. And one such thylakoid is being magnified here. When you think of the photosynthesis, you think of the entire process taking place into the chloroplast. Now, therefore, you must understand what is the arrangement inside a thylakoid. Basically, inside a thylakoid, there are chlorophyll molecules. These are spots, the dots which are being shown are chlorophyll molecules. They are shown symbolically. Actually, they are present in the membrane, because these are all membranes ultimately. What is a membrane? Membrane is a kind of a flat, basic flat structure, and it can then be folded into different ways. So these are all folded membranes, and in the membrane the chlorophyll molecules are present. Chlorophyll, I think you are aware that chlorophyll is a kind of a pigment. Have you heard this word? Plants have pigments. But you must know that the pigments which are there in the plants is not just only chlorophyll. What are the other pigments which are present? If this leaf is crushed and the matter, the greenish matter, is then subjected to chemical analysis, it is found that it has got chlorophyll. Actually, chlorophyll at least of two types. Maybe that by chance in your books you have heard, you have read that the chlorophyll is of the two types, chlorophyll A and chlorophyll B. In addition to that, there are what is called as Carotins. So chlorophylls, carotins, and there is one more class of compounds, xanthophylls. So chlorophylls, carotins, xanthophylls, several compounds are there, and all of them are involved in photosynthesis. But even if you know chlorophyll at this moment, it is quite okay. So chlorophyll molecules are there, other pigment molecules also will be there, and now what will happen is these pigment molecules, the chlorophyll molecules, will be important agents. Now I have used the word agents. What is the role of the chlorophyll molecule? Let us understand this. Once again, the solar radiation, wherever I am using the yellow color, understand this is a flow of photons. When the light is falling on leaf, it is coming inside the chloroplast, and inside the chloroplast it is coming inside the thylakoid, and now the chlorophyll molecule gets involved in certain reactions. Well, chlorophyll molecule will act as a catalyst. You know the word catalyst. Catalyst is something which will help the process, which will help the reaction to take place, but will not be used. So chlorophyll is only its presence is necessary. There are two roles, 1 and 2. There are two roles of the chlorophyll. Understand this very clearly. All of you know that without chlorophyll, photosynthesis is not possible. And chlorophyll is present inside a thylakoid. Now it is the right time for you to understand what is the exact role of the chlorophyll. Why chlorophyll is required? Number 1, chlorophyll is required for a breakdown of water. Breakdown of water? Yes, it takes place. Do you know by chance the word which is used for the breakdown of water? Try to remember these words. Photolysis. Photolysis. What do you mean by photolysis or photolysis? Breakdown of water. Water is not easy to break down. Water molecules, their bonds are not easy to break down. If you keep water in a dish and keep it anywhere in the sun or in the shade, do you think the water will break up? No. The water will vanish. What will happen to that water? It will get evaporated. This is not evaporation. Here the water molecule is being broken, H2O. One atom of hydrogen and 2 atoms of oxygen and the bonds between them. 1 atom of hydrogen and 2 H2O, sorry. 2 atoms of hydrogen and 1 atom of oxygen, H2O, and the bond between them. And the water molecule will break. The bond between the H and O will be broken, and that's not easy. For that to happen, 2 agents are required. One is light. The photon energy will be required to break the bond between hydrogen and oxygen. But that can happen only in the presence of chlorophyll. That means only the leaves have this ability, because leaves can accept the photons, and water has already reached. Water will reach. How the water is reaching here? The water is being absorbed by the roots, and then it is passing through the stem, and then it is coming up to the leaf. So water is available, sunlight is available, that is photon is available, and chlorophyll is available. So in the presence of the water, light and chlorophyll, the water molecule will break. Now water molecule, I wrongly said earlier, it has got 2 oxygen, but then that's how I sometimes, there is slip of tongue. So in the excitement to explain, I do mistakes. But then here I am trying to correct. Yeah, a water molecule will have 2 hydrogens and 1 oxygen. Here I am taking 2 water molecules for convenience. Because when water molecule will break, it will form protons and electrons and oxygen molecule. Yeah, this is very famous. I think one of the most famous thing everybody knows is that the oxygen is being produced. Photosynthesis is the process in which oxygen is being produced. And when I said earlier that whatever 20% oxygen is now in the environment, atmosphere, it's all because photosynthesis started. When did photosynthesis start? I don't remember exactly. I can say that it started maybe 1.5 billion years ago. I'm just roughly saying this. 1.5 billion years. My God, it must have been just a kind of life which was very simple form, unicellular life, and some of the cells started becoming plants. I mean, they were not becoming plants, they started behaving like a plant because they started developing this pigment. And once they started releasing oxygen. So it took a long time for this 20% oxygen which is there on the earth, because of which the animals are able to exist. So that all started long back. But this is very, very important, and we know this, and we are thankful to plants for providing us the oxygen. But then that oxygen comes from breakdown of water. Why the water should break down? Because you need protons and electrons. For photosynthesis you need protons and electrons. Now you may say, why do you need electrons? Wonderful things. You may say that photon energy is now being converted into electron energy. That's very important. These are energy conversions in nature. The solar energy, the photon energy is getting converted into electron energy, and this electron energy actually can exist in the form of the electrons which are released from the water molecule. And one more thing, the chlorophyll molecule itself also can lose electrons. There are two sources of electrons for photosynthesis. One is the breakdown of the water, where electrons are available, and the second source is the chlorophyll molecule. Chlorophyll molecule is a very big molecule. And when light falls on chlorophyll molecule, the outer electron of magnesium, chlorophyll in the center has magnesium. One small additional idea I will give you. You already know the hemoglobin. What is there in the center of the hemoglobin? What is there in the center of the hemoglobin molecule is iron. Similarly, the chlorophyll molecule is rather similar to hemoglobin molecule, and in the center of a chlorophyll molecule there is magnesium. Now, what is the role of photons there? Photon will dislodge the electron of the chlorophyll molecule. Now, this electron becomes energy-rich electron. Why it is energy-rich? Because it has been displaced and taken away from the nucleus of the atom. You know this very well. When the electron is taken away from the nucleus of the atom, it becomes high energy electron. This much of physics and chemistry you already know. I'll repeat. When photons are striking on the chlorophyll molecule, one of the electron of the chlorophyll molecule will be dislodged, will be pushed away from the center of the nucleus of the atom, and it will become a high energy electron. Now these electrons and these electrons play a role, and that's a complicated thing. Probably in some of the books there is a mention of the cyclic and non-cyclic electron flow. I am trying to avoid all that just now at least. So if I go on trying to say all these things right now, some of you will switch off the video and just do something else. I don't want you to do that. I am sure many of you are interested in knowing the photosynthesis and respiration together. So there are lots of issues. The 4 electrons which are being produced here as a breakdown product of the water, and this electron which is also available, which is coming from the chlorophyll molecule. There is a certain kind of process that takes place known as a cyclic electron flow and non-cyclic electron flow. But ultimately, what is going to happen? Ultimately, you happen to get ATP. Very important. You get adenosine triphosphate, and you are getting adenosine triphosphate, which is a chemical energy. This chemical energy is being formed from physical energy. Why not? I just want you to realize that the photon energy, that is a physical energy, is getting converted into chemical energy. Did you know this? Did you know this from your school books? That in the leaves, ATP is being produced. So when light falls on the leaves, ATP is being produced. ATP ka sakya tayar zara? Well, there is a reaction, there is ADP, adenosine diphosphate. And from adenosine diphosphate, adenosine triphosphate is produced. This reaction can be but you can understand ADP, ADP gets converted into ATP, ATP, adenosine triphosphate. The difference between these two is that the ADP has a slightly lower level of energy and ATP has a slightly higher level of energy. So to convert ADP into ATP, you require energy. And what is the source of energy? Well, it's high energy electron. So electron must have energy. So electron energy is put into the ATP energy. And from where this electron gets its energy? It gets it from photon. हे बघा एक टप्पू मारला तर ती जी फोटॉनची एनर्जी असेल ती इथे मारली गेली की तो इलेक्ट्रॉन ती इलेक्ट्रॉनला एनर्जी मिळते म्हणजे एका बॉलने दुसऱ्या बॉलला आपण मारलं तर दुसरा बॉल तर घरंगळत जातो की नाही इट्स लाईक दॅट सो जस्ट लाईक वन बॉल स्ट्राइक्स अनदर बॉल अँड सेकंड बॉल स्टार्ट्स मूविंग इन द सेम वे a photon strikes an electron and electron becomes high energy electron and high energy electron allows the energy to be given to ADP molecule and ADP molecule becomes ATP. हे सगळे इथे लिहिणं शक्य नाही म्हणजे या सगळ्या गोष्टी इथे होतात. सो इन दिस गिवन बॉक्स लाईक कंपार्टमेंट अ व्हेरी टायनी स्ट्रक्चर व्हिच इज थायलॉइड दीज थिंग्स आर हॅपनिंग. तुम्हाला माहित होतं स्कूल्समध्ये तुमचं लक्ष होतं का त्यावेळेला? कदाचित असेल कदाचित नसेल आता नीट माहित करून घ्या. सो दॅट इज हाऊ ATP इज बीइंग प्रोड्यूस्ड. सो व्हॉट इज हॅपनिंग इन द थायलॉइड प्रोडक्शन ऑफ ATP. So ATP is produced here everywhere, inside the granum everywhere ATP is being produced. And ATP is badly required for photosynthesis because without ATP glucose cannot be produced. But is it the only ATP that is required? No. You also require something more. You know, glucose is what? C6H12O6. You know glucose formula. C6H12O6. So you require carbon, and what is the source of carbon? Carbon dioxide, and carbon dioxide is already here entering. How does carbon dioxide enter into the leaves? Can you tell me? How does carbon dioxide enter into the leaf? Kaustubh sir, can you say how the carbon dioxide enters into the leaf?
Stomata.
To stomata, right? So through the stomata the carbon dioxide will be entering. Kaustubh sir, whether the stomata are more on the upper surface or lower surface?
They are more on the lower surface.
On the lower surface there will be more. Okay, fine. And you know it's very interesting. The upper surface is shining and lower surface is not so much of shining. You know there is so much of solar energy. And usually the plants, the leaves have upper surface shining so that the leaves don't want all that too much of photon to get time. So some of them will be reflected and some of them will enter. My God, the amount of photon is so much and leaves don't want all of them. Most of the things will be reflected. Some of them will be absorbed. Some of the light will be absorbed. Some will pass through. You know, I can hold a leaf. I can say that a lot of light is passing through. So what is the source? The light is falling on this, partly reflected, partly it is passing through, and some of it is going into the cells. तो सुद्धा खूप जास्त होतो. लाईटचं काही कमीच नाही हो, भरपूर होऊ शकतं. आणि म्हणूनच तुम्ही किती छोट्याशा खोलीमध्ये सुद्धा तुमचा टिश्यू कल्चर करू शकता. You know the tissue culture, and tissue culture of plants are being grown in test tubes and flasks, and they are grown in a room of this kind, and this light is quite enough for that. So I mean to say photosynthesis doesn't require too much of light. A moderate amount of light is quite good for photosynthesis. And one more thing, because I started talking about light. Probably some of you know that a particular wavelength is more useful. I've used the word wavelength because all this light will have different wavelengths. You know, the wavelengths of the light are somewhere falling between 400 to 700 nanometers. Have you read such things in books? Do you know what is the wavelength span of the visible light? Do you know that there are certain waves which are smaller than 400 and there are certain waves which are greater than 700? I think we are not talking of that. What light we are able to use, our eyes are able to use the light to see the things, exactly the same wavelengths, 400 to 700, are being used by the plants. Out of that, plants prefer red wavelengths. I mean, those wavelengths which are corresponding to red light, which are closer to somewhere 680. You know, some of you are not understanding this, quite fine, don't worry. You're going to learn all that. You know, good amount of physics is required, at least basic physics is required to understand biology. Similarly, some basic chemistry is required to understand biology. आता तुमच्या 10th पर्यंत बहुतेकांना मला वाटतं की स्पेक्ट्रम माहिती आहे. You know, the spectrum, the visible spectrum, and the visible spectrum has usually the range 400 to 700. By chance तुम्ही मी एक शब्द सांगतो, ऐकलाय का बघा, इलेक्ट्रोमॅग्नेटिक स्पेक्ट्रम. ऐकला असेल, ठीक आहे, नसेल डोंट वरी, तुम्हाला ते माहित पाहिजे, होईल हळूहळू. I mean to say, below 400 and above 700, there are many waves existing, and plants will be using only that much part of the radiation which is between 400 to 700 nanometer wavelengths, and best part they will use red and blue also. These pigments, you know, are able to choose the things. Some pigments will choose the wavelengths towards red side, and some pigments will choose the wavelengths toward the purple, violet, blue side, and so on. So those details are there, and I'm not going to talk about that. But out of all that, ultimately, what is the role of light? Number one, to break down water molecules, to have protons and electrons. Number two, the photons will help dislodging of the electron, and that energy will be used to produce ATP. So ATP is being produced, but I told you, along with ATP, you require carbon dioxide, because what is the source of C6H12O6? That is what I was talking about. You require carbon source, you require hydrogen source, and you require oxygen source. Carbon and oxygen both are coming from carbon dioxide. Then what is left? Hydrogen. I'll repeat. C6H12O6 is glucose, and glucose is a product of photosynthesis. Carbon and oxygen come from carbon dioxide. And what is the source of H? Source of H is water. But what is happening to the water? It is broken into protons and electrons. These are now being used. These are being used. The protons are being used. That means the hydrogen is being used to make another compound, NADPH. Why it is written as NADPH and H? Don't worry. There is a chemical reason for this. तुम्ही म्हणाल बेसिकली हे भानगड काय? NAD gets converted into NADPH. Some of you may be knowing. त्याचा लॉंग फॉर्म मी सांगतो, पण व्हिडिओ बंद नाही करायचा. Nicotinamide adenine dinucleotide phosphate, NADPH. Actually, it should be NADPH. Nicotinamide adenine dinucleotide phosphate. काय नाव आहे का? Well, it's a kind of a coenzyme. You know, there are enzymes, and similarly there are coenzymes. And this NADP is an acceptor of hydrogen. And what is the source of protons? Breakdown of water. So water breaks down into protons, electrons. The protons are accepted by NADP, and NADP becomes NADPH and H. तुम्हाला इथे 4 आहेत, इथे 2च आहेत. आणखी 2 घ्या, 2 NADP घ्या. ते बॅलन्सिंग वगैरे करता येतं, तो काही मुद्दा नाही. Ultimately, this is an important product. What is this product? NADPH plus H. आता मी 3 products इथे तुम्हाला सांगतो, नीट लक्ष द्या. A and B and C. What is ATP? How and where it is produced? It is produced inside the thylakoid. It is produced because of the high energy electron. You require B, NADPH plus H. How it is produced? Because in the stroma, this is all happening in the stroma, and the NADP is there in the stroma, and NADP will accept the protons. Protons are being produced inside. Protons are being produced inside the thylakoid, and NADP will accept them. They will come out. The protons come out. Protons come out, and NADP will accept them, and the material will be NADPH and H. C, carbon dioxide. Carbon dioxide आपण already बघितलंय. Carbon dioxide enters into the leaf. When it will enter into the leaf, it will enter into the chloroplast, and in the stroma you have A, B, C available. Actually, this is a granum. So ATP is being produced, ATP comes out. ATP comes out, the protons come out and NADPH is formed. And CO2 is otherwise also available in the stroma. Okay, the stroma is CO2 available. Now you have three things together, A plus B plus C. What is A? ATP. What is B? NADPH. And what is C? Carbon dioxide. So these three things are available in the stroma. आता याचा रोल संपला. Thylakoidचा, granumचा रोल संपला. Now the role is that of the stroma. And what is there in the stroma? You already have A and B and C. And now in the stroma there are many enzymes and a special chemical process. It's very popularly known as Calvin cycle. Calvin cycle त्याला C3 cycle पण म्हटलेलं आहे. This is all typically present inside the stroma. This is not happening inside the thylakoid. Thylakoid मध्ये काय झालं? Proton तयार झाले, breakdown of water, protons are ready and they are coming out and ATP is being produced. These are the only two roles of the thylakoids which takes place with the help of the chlorophyll. But these materials, ATP coming out, NADPH being formed here outside in the stroma and the carbon dioxide which is available, they come together in a kind of a cycle. Some 8-10 reactions are there and ultimately what you get is glucose. खूप सोपं वाटतं ना? Cycle. What do you mean by cycle? या ठिकाणी सगळ्या cycles, Calvin cycle सगळीकडे होत असते. Actually, a cycle is a sequence of reactions where the original compound is regenerated. आता याच्या खूप स्टेप्स आहेत. Ribulose monophosphate मी सांगतोय बघा. Ribulose monophosphate, ribulose diphosphate, phosphoglyceric acid, phosphoglyceraldehyde आणि पुन्हा ribulose monophosphate. Phosphoglyceraldehyde, aldehyde. आता तुम्हाला थोडंसं ऑर्गॅनिक केमिस्ट्री माहित असेल किंवा होईल. यू नो ऍसिड आणि अल्डिहाइड मध्ये काय फरक आहे बरं? ऍसिड इज ऑक्सिजन रिच, aldehyde is hydrogen rich. You want to get sugar C6H12O6, so there is a lot of hydrogen. I told you what is the source of hydrogen? Source of hydrogen is water. Water is entering inside, water is already available in the stroma and water will enter inside the thylakoid also. See, the water is entering inside the, it is there in the stroma, it is also entering into the thylakoid. And now this water is being broken and the protons are there. So this is what is called as reducing power. बघा मी थोडासा शब्द वापरतोय तुमच्या परवानगीने. थोडं कॉम्प्लिकेटेड मी तुमच्या परवानगीने करतोय. स्विच ऑफ करायचं नाही. Reducing power. वर्गात जेव्हा चालू असतं ना त्यावेळेला स्विच ऑन आणि स्विच ऑफ करण्याचा प्रश्न नसतो. मुकाट्याने ऐकावं लागतं विद्यार्थ्याला. पण त्यातही युक्त्या करतात विद्यार्थी. थोडं झोपून घेतात, थोडं लक्ष असं दाखवतात. साहजिकच आहे. एखादं फार बोर व्हायला लागलं म्हणजे ते होईलच ना. आता आम्हाला ते कळत असते की तुम्ही स्विच ऑन ठेवताय का स्विच ऑफ ठेवताय. पण बघा फार मजेशीर गोष्ट आहे. निसर्गातली तेवढी भव्य गोष्ट आहे. इट इज दिस प्रोसेस बिकॉज ऑफ विच वी आर ऑल सर्वाइव्हिंग ऑन अर्थ. वी ऑल एनिमल्स. सो द NADPH is a reducing power. What do you mean by reducing power? Basically, what is to be reduced? What do you mean by reduction? Reduction is addition of hydrogen. What is oxidation? Addition of oxygen is oxidation and addition of hydrogen is reduction. थोडे दुसरे अर्थ आहेत बरं का. Removal of hydrogen ला काय म्हणतात? Suppose from a compound hydrogen is being removed. त्याला काय म्हणाल सांगा? Removal of hydrogen is again oxidation. Addition of hydrogen reduction. मला वाटतं की इथे reducing power आहे. Actually, which part of this molecule we are NADP चा काय आपल्याला उपयोग नाहीये. We want the NADP to only to carry the hydrogen. ही जी reducing power ही आहे H. So we want this one. We want this hydrogen to be used. This hydrogen will have to be added to carbon and oxygen. So when carbon and oxygen and they meet with the hydrogen, you get glucose. But this cannot happen in one reaction. For the carbon dioxide to accept hydrogen, you require lots of reactions. You require ATP also because ultimately glucose has the energy. आता या ग्लुकोज मध्ये एनर्जी कुठून येणार सांगा? The energy of the glucose comes from ATP energy. नुसती एनर्जी काय, ग्लुकोज इज मॅटर ऑल्सो. ग्लुकोज विल रिप्रेझेंट मॅटर अँड एनर्जी बोथ. आता तुम्हाला हे दोन शब्द माहिती आहेत, मॅटर अँड एनर्जी. इट इज अ मॅटर बिकॉज CHO ते atoms आहेत ना, ते अवेलेबल आहेत. So that's matter. But when you consider the bonds between carbon, hydrogen, oxygen, the bonds have energy, bond energies. So if you want to put together carbon, oxygen and hydrogen to make a molecule which is energy rich glucose, you will actually need ATP energy, because ATP is convenient energy and that ATP has to be added. So in the presence of ATP energy, I mean the supply of ATP energy, carbon dioxide and the NADPH will interact with these compounds and ultimately you get glucose. The glucose is energy rich, everybody knows. The energy of glucose comes from ATP and energy of ATP is coming from sun. हे किती महत्वाचं आहे बघा. Solar energy comes into ATP energy and ATP energy goes into glucose energy. किती महत्वाचं आहे लक्षात घ्या. Once again, solar energy in the thylakoid, the solar energy is being used and the ATP energy is being formed, and ATP energy is added to the protons and the carbon dioxide and protons, they interact using the ATP energy. So the glucose molecule which is produced has the energy coming from the ATP. That means it is coming from the sun. So all the glucose that we consume, all the food that we consume, it's all because of the blessings of sun. You can say it is the solar energy that is packed into our molecules. But glucose can be converted into starch, and glucose can also be converted into cellulose. That you know very well. And as per need, the plants can use this. Fundamental process is great. This is all dark reaction, and this is all called as light reaction. The light reaction is something that is taking place in the granule. Why it is called as light reaction? Because it requires light. And what are the products of light reaction? ATP and NADPH. A and B, these are the products of light reaction. Then the dark reaction occurs. What is dark reaction? Dark reaction is something that takes place in the stroma. Why it is called as dark? Because it does not require light. असं काही म्हणता येतं का? असं म्हणता येतं का लाईट रिॲक्शन रिक्वायर्स लाईट अँड डार्क रिॲक्शन रिक्वायर्स डार्कनेस? असं नाही. डार्क रिॲक्शन कॅन ऑल्सो ऑकर in the presence of light, but it is not dependent on light. See, light reaction is dependent on light. Without light, this cannot happen. And the Calvin cycle, which is a chemical cycle, where the glucose is being produced, and that reaction is taking place in the stroma. Whether light is available or not available, that doesn't matter. But तरी सुद्धा कल्पना करा, हे दोन products केव्हा तयार होतील? A and B. They will be produced only during day. I'll repeat my statement. The A and B products are produced only during day. Why? Because light is available only during day. And when these two are available, then only the Calvin cycle will operate. म्हणजे झालंच का? म्हणजे काय की हे सायकल दिवसाच होणार. बऱ्याच जणांना याच्यामध्ये कन्फ्युजन असतं. काहींना वाटतं की हे दिवसाला आणि हे रात्री. No, no, no. The two products of the light reaction, ATP and NADPH, they are produced only during day. And they cannot be stored. So whenever they are produced, they must be used. So these are being produced during day, and during day only the Calvin cycle will operate. The only thing is that Calvin cycle is not dependent directly on the light, and that's why it is called as dark reaction. So photosynthesis has two reactions, light reaction and dark reaction. This is something which was explained to you through your books and to your teachers must have explained to you, and you get glucose. Fantastic. Whenever I think about the photosynthesis, I really realize why many communities in the world and many of the ancient cultures of the world have taken worship of sun. I think they may or may not be knowing this science, but they were aware that without light, food cannot be produced. And without food, life on earth cannot continue. Are you feeling hungry? Take a small break. Even I want to take a break. I need your attention for a few minutes more. Once again, understand this great process of nature, and the photosynthesis is going on land as well as in water, and it is said that the algae in the water are doing more photosynthesis than the plants on the land. It is difficult to accept this, but imagine there is less land on earth and more oceans. So from that point of view, you can expect more algae in the ocean, and that's of course a matter of quantification of the photosynthesis, but the process basically remains more or less the same, whether it is algae or whether it is bryophyte or pteridophyte or angiosperms or gymnosperms. All of them have similar process, slight changes here and there. So once again, what is the photosynthesis? It is trapping of solar radiation. Who will do this? The antenna. Leaf is an antenna, plants are the antennae, and they are able to trap the solar radiation. If I stand in sun, I will not be able to use the solar radiation, my body will get heated. But plants are very wonderful organs, the leaves, which are having the capacity to absorb the solar radiation and use it. So here the physical energy is being converted into chemical energy. Why physical energy? Because this is solar energy and is getting converted into chemical energy. Which is the chemical energy? The ATP. And what is use of ATP? The ATP chemical energy is used to make another energy-rich molecule known as glucose. ATP has energy, glucose has energy. ATP has small quantity of energy. Glucose have more quantity of energy. So a lot of ATP will be used. Many ATP molecules will be used to make one glucose molecule. And so glucose molecule will be energy-rich. And the glucose can be converted into starch, because in the leaves usually the starch is produced, because when glucose is there, it is osmotically active. Glucose is osmotically active. Some of you are understanding what I am saying, and some of you are not understanding. It's okay if you don't understand. Out of this, even if you understand 50% and remember 25%, तरी सुद्धा फाउंडेशन कोर्सचा खूप फायदा होणार आहे. शिवाय रेकॉर्डेड लेक्चर्स आहेत तुमच्याकडे असतील, जसं पुढे जाल तसं तुम्ही ते जास्त ऐकून माहिती करून घ्याल. So starch is produced and starch is stored, and plants will also produce cellulose out of it, because cellulose and starch, they are ultimately made up of glucose. The plants will store the starch and they will use it for themselves. Why plants produce glucose and starch? कुणासाठी? तुम्ही म्हणाल ॲनिमल्ससाठी. नो, प्लांट्सचा काय संबंध आहे? ॲनिमल्सचा काय संबंध आहे? प्लांट्स म्हणजे आम्ही आमच्यासाठी करतो. Plants are doing it for themselves, because the glucose which they produce, they themselves use it in the process of respiration. तुम्हाला माहिती आहे पुढे? This glucose is used in the process of respiration, and from glucose ATP molecules are produced. The equation आठवत आहे तुम्हाला? You have C6H12O6, glucose plus oxygen. Glucose plus oxygen, you get what? Glucose plus oxygen, what do you get? You get water and carbon dioxide and ATP. And that is how the energy that is locked up here is released in the process of respiration. Glucose has got energy of the ATP, and now when we consume the ATP energy, you, me, and the animals, when they use this, or even this animal in the water, algae it will consume, and when it will use these animals, we animals, when we use this glucose, again the glucose molecule is broken down, and when the glucose molecule is broken down, energy is released. So here is the packing of energy. Photosynthesis, packing of energy, and respiration is releasing of the energy. It's wonderful. And the energy is again available, and you get ATP molecules again. You get ATP molecules from glucose. I write here 38 ATP molecules. You get 38 ATP molecules. And this is very famous number. From one glucose molecule you get 38 ATP molecules. Of course, that 38 ATP molecule is a very small quantity. We require unending trillions and trillions of trillions. Every cell is using trillions of ATP molecules. But then we are using lots of glucose molecules daily. So this is how photosynthesis is locking up the energy. Whose energy? Solar energy. In what form? In the form of glucose. And what is respiration? It is unlocking of energy. And where it will occur? It will occur in all cells. And in what form the energy will be available? ATP. म्हणजे काय होते बघा? Photon energy to ATP. ATP to glucose. And with glucose will be oxidized, again the glucose energy will be converted into ATP. तुम्ही म्हणाल हे करण्यापेक्षा ॲनिमल्सने सगळं सनमध्ये उभं राहायचं आहे. ते विल गेट ATP. तसं नाही होत. हे फक्त लीफला जमू शकतं. Only leaf has that special ability to convert the solar energy into ATP energy. And we people, animals and the fungi, we cannot do it. We cannot do it. Most of the bacteria also cannot do it. So that is how plants are very different, very special on earth, because they are able to trap the solar energy. And then all five kingdoms, I told you, the glucose which is produced by the plants is basically for themselves. So they use it, but they produce so much that it is also used for animals, by animals and fungi and protista and bacteria. And ultimately, all that glucose energy will be unlocked in the process of respiration. And this is something that we want to continue to study. But I think for today's session, it would be good if we concentrate only on photosynthesis. I have a suggestion. Whatever standard you might have read about the photosynthesis, please go through the details and get ready, and also be ready for understanding respiration, because today we have learned photosynthesis, then we shall be learning respiration, because these two are complementary processes, so they should be studied either on the same day or at least in the subsequent days. But I think more than 1 hour is 1 hour is more than enough for you today. Okay, I hope you are enjoying the foundation course and feel always excited, always nice, always positive. Thank you so much.